welcome to the Law Center videocast. I'm your host and founder of the Law Center, Larry DeMarco. Thank you for joining us this evening. We go live on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., so please join us in the chat room on the right where you can interact with other viewers. Today we are here with Amanda Sillars. It's evening for me, but it's morning for her because she's 14 hours away in Australia. She's the founder of Eenie Meenie Miney Moe Foundation in Australia and the Parental Alienation Awareness Day in Australia and New Zealand. Amanda, thank you for joining us this evening and morning for you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you for, I've been anticipating this for a while. Thank you for being here. You are the founder of the Eenie Meenie Miney Moe Foundation, which tell us more about it. Spreads information about parental alienation.
Yeah, what we do is we have different platforms where we educate parents and practitioners about parental alienation, the harm it causes, as well as evidence-based practice on how to manage these type of cases. Yes, it's we see there's a great need for it out there because there's so many people think that they know what they're doing with a case, but they're very counterintuitive. And from my experience, I've seen that there's a great need for further education.
And you also had an experience with parental alienation. Before you start, I want everyone to know there's a happy ending, but please tell us about your experience and your relationship with your children.
Yeah, well, it was quite some time ago. It was in 2011. I had sent my children on holidays and they never returned. And there was lots of dynamics that were going on beforehand. Pretty much there was many red flags. I would find myself being misrepresented to other people in the community, at school. I'd go to the shopping centre and things like that. And so there was all these dynamics going on.
Just for clarification, most may understand, but when you say you sent them on holiday and they didn't return, meaning they went to visit your ex, it was your ex's custody turn and he didn't return them, right?
Yeah, so basically they were going over there for a 4-week holiday because we had arranged, 50-50 sort of care. Even though he'd moved into state, we sort of had to change things. And, I kind of thought, he'd left the children with me. So I was a loving, safe parent, when he left the children with me. But then all of a sudden to find that my children were now not wanting to get back on the plane and they were taking children to different psychologists and getting them to report things about me. And, I didn't know that this was going to happen until I actually went to the airport to pick them up. And I was standing at the gates waiting for them to walk through, really excited. I've got all their Christmas gifts and, stocked up on the shopping, ready for the kids to come home. And there was no children on that plane. And that was my first step into this situation of parental alienation. I had no idea what was going on. It took me months to even find out that my case was actually a parental alienation case. It was, there was no information. I'd never heard of it, never heard of the term up until a counsellor said to me, there was a court-ordered handover, and she said to me that this is a textbook parental alienation case after my children ran out the door, ran down the street. And I watched their father stand there with his arms crossed, kind of smirking at me at the handover. And it was quite confronting because I'm not a dangerous person. I've never done anything that would, make my children fear me. And so that was where my sort of journey started, was to find out what is this parental alienation.
How long was the separation that you endured? You said they didn't come home. When did you see them again?
Well, we had another attempt of a handover as well, and they had managed to, the father had managed to convince that psychologist before I arrived that the children didn't want to see me. And even though the children weren't actually in the appointment with them, because I saw them outside, they were outside for an hour and a half, and he spoke with them the whole time. And he was supposed to hand them over, and I walked in there again thinking I'm going to get my kids, I'm going to fly back, had the flights booked and everything. And he said, today's not going to happen. And I was like, what do you mean? There's a court order in place for the children to come home on the plane with me. And he said they didn't want to come. And I said, well, the children haven't even been in here talking with you. And he looked kind of surprised that I knew that the kids were outside. And he knew he'd made a mistake after we sat down and we spoke about the situation, because he realised that I wasn't this ogre that I was being made out to be. But it wasn't until months later that we had another a court hearing, and it was just getting worse. The kids were starting to get, very abusive towards me, calling me nasty things and things like that. And I had no idea that that a parent would allow a child to talk to another parent that way, so rudely. There were some words that I've never even, I wouldn't even repeat myself that I was being called. And so I remember getting on. Yeah, they were 10 and 12. Yeah, 10 and 12 years old. So they were just young kids, just,
Sure.
One going about to hit puberty and all that, lots of things going on in his life, and, about to go into high school. And so there was a lot of things that were going on,
And you're talking about a flight. You're in Australia. Where is he? On the other end of Australia, but you're both in the same country?
Yeah, we were all originally in Perth, and then many years after separation, when he remarried and had more children, they decided to move interstate. And the strange thing was that they were telling people that they were moving because of me. There was all this picture that was being painted all the time. But the funny thing is that he left the children with me full time. So if I was a safe enough parent to leave the children with me full time and move interstate and only have them for half of school holidays,
When you say state, do you mean the United States? I don't know what that term means.
Eastern States is Brisbane. Eastern States, yeah, the east side of Australia.
Okay.
So I was safe enough to leave them with me full time, but yet all of a sudden I was misrepresented as being abusive, aggressive, a whore, an alcoholic, everything that I'm not. Yeah.
Sure. Amanda, so what was the gist? Was this his new spouse that threw a wrench in things that you guys were functional, but was this the dynamic of that third party dynamic that feels threatened by you or wants to keep her new family? Did you ever get to the bottom of what caused everything? When you and he were getting along were functioning before that happened?
Yeah, well, so what happened was when we first separated, it was like a textbook breakup. And we sort of said, okay, you go your way, I go my way. We'll just share the kids. I was very accommodating because I was working from home. So I'd have the kids, most of the week. And then on the weekends, he'd be like, holiday dad, and have them on the weekends kind of thing. And so that was kind of going along. But there were some dynamics that were happening, because I would go to the shopping centre, and people who were friends before with me were now looking at me and sort of not even saying hi, and they'd just look at me in disgust, and I didn't really understand what was kind of going on. So there were some dynamics that were sort of happening before he repartnered.
You were being disparaged. You were being disparaged in the community, okay, and to the children apparently, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was things like saying that that I had sued him and taken him financially, where I actually left the family home and I moved into our investment property that had 100% loan. So I left without any of the equity that we had. So there was things like that were being said to people, which were completely false, because I had an agreement that he forced me to sign, and which shows exactly what the split was. So it was funny because I've always been quite optimistic. I go, oh, don't worry about that, just focus on your own life and things like that. But I didn't realise all this stuff that was going on in the background. And then the stepmom coming in, and she was very insecure around me. She would, everything that I did that was good, that would get turned into something bad. Like if I built a nice house, oh, she's so extravagant, she's so money greedy. And, if I exercised, I was obsessed. If I chose healthy food for the kids, I was fanatical and, really controlling and stuff like that, and I kind of, my kids would come back and they were reporting, some of these dynamics, and I would just say, look, we've got different homes, we've got different rules, and I just try to be positive, But then they'd say, oh, but, you're always talking bad about Dad. And I'd be like, I don't talk about your dad unless it's something positive, But then what I realised that there was, they were being questioned from me all the time, and they were starting to report back bad things about me, even if it didn't happen, because they were fishing, they were interrogating them for information. So over time, they were starting to tell them negative things, like, even down to like bedtime or teeth brushing, or just everything was being reported back and twisted. I thought it was always them talking bad about me, but it was a lot of the interrogation that was going on. So it was the kids were giving into that pressure and telling them exactly what they wanted to hear.
And it's the suggestion of a question. Isn't she doing this? Isn't she this bad? And then eventually the children start to believe it. But Amanda, as you and I well know, parental alienation can destroy a parent-child relationship, but things turned around. The children are with you. You have a good relationship with your children. Tell us how you beat it. Tell us how things worked out.
Okay, so back in 2015, after almost 5 years of trying to fly across and see my children, calling them, sending them messages, sending them birthday gifts and things like that, I wouldn't get any responses. And then finally, out of the blue, I get this SMS from my son. Well, actually, I didn't actually know it was my son. It was from an unknown number saying,
Can I ask you, did you actually fly across country and never see your children?
Yeah, I did. It was devastating.
How did that happen? That's awful.
It was every quarter of school I would fly across, and I would be so excited, and usually I'd have some gifts and I'd have a holiday planned, for the period of time that I was there, and I'd go to the location, and either the children weren't there or they would run from me, or they would I'd have to go to the house, but then I'd be accused of, if I was knocking on the gate, I was accused of being abusive, at the gate. Even though I kept a device on me to prove that I was not being abusive, there were still accusations. I had to cover myself because there was always constant accusations of me being unstable or, mentally unwell, and the thing is that they always use the fact that my childhood, there's some things that happened in my childhood, which we will talk about, that happened, and they always use that against me, unfortunately, which it was a battle. So I
wanted to clarify that, because it's hard to believe that how painful that is to get in a flight and not have any type of satisfaction. But you received an SMS one day from your son. Take it from there. But I'm so interested in hearing about Eenie Meenie Miney Moe. So if you could give the summary version, because it's such a great story. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Well, basically, I got a secret SMS, and my son sent this through to me, and I couldn't believe that I'd actually got some contact. And he's like, "When are you coming here?" And I literally had just been there to visit, and he didn't even know that I'd been on a flight to come and visit him. And so I flew across, and a couple of days later, and he said, "I'm running away because I can't have a relationship with you." And straight away I said, well, even better. I said, I'll sell my business and my home, and I'll move across, and we can start a life together here. And he was really sort of anxious about that at first, because he was worried about me being near the dad and all that. And he's like, okay, so we ran with that. And he's been living with me since 2015. And our first thing we did was go on a holiday to Rekindle, which was really important, to rekindle and not even talk about the situation. So that was, really important. And there's been a lot of things to unpack, obviously, in this situation.
So he reached out to you. Basically, he had enough. Your child overcame it. He must be an extraordinary young man.
Yeah, well, it was actually a friend who said, what's the deal with your mum? You never talk about your mum, you never see your mum. And he's like, oh, well, I lied about mum to, please dad. And he's like, man, she must be so pissed. And he's like, well, no, she's actually not. She always tries to come and see me, and she sends me birthday gifts, and she always knows what we like and things like that. And he goes, well, why don't you contact her? And he was sort of like, didn't know why. And then he's like, well, he's going to have to do it on the secret. And that's why it was like a secret contact that he made. you know.
Amanda, you make a tremendous point that bystanders are really relevant and can influence a situation positively if they see an injustice happening. So not getting into detail, because otherwise we're not going to hear about Eenie Meenie Miney Moe. Did your daughter come close behind the son too?
No, it was a long time after. I missed out on 8 years with my daughter. It was the biggest battle. For so many years, I cried rivers. I felt incomplete. I felt like I lost my purpose. You know, I went and bought 2 horses to try and replace that, not replace, but to try and, I had all this love to give, you know, and nowhere for it to go. So I bought these horses that end up being my therapy horses to help get me through, and I sort of kept me going. And my son, it was really difficult for him because he sort of became the meat in the sandwich sort of thing, like trying to get us to reunify. And I couldn't keep putting pressure on him to say, you know, do this, you know, help me with, you know, get connection with our daughter, you know, with your sister. And, you know, he would take things to her, like I'd pack a nice lunch or something like that, or, you know, little gifts here and there. And, but then it just got to the point where she was completely shutting down and it was starting to really affect her. And we actually did secretly meet when she was 17, and it was so sad to see the look in her eyes, the shame, the head down, that distant look. It was almost like this zombie look in her. It's like I didn't see any sparkle in her eyes when I saw her. And we sat down on the floor and she was looking at our legs, and we go, oh, she's like, oh, we look the same. Like she was looking at the similar genetics, going, oh, look at this, and look at her hands the same. And yeah, and I was like, well, you know, my little girl, or you're not little girl anymore, you're taller than me. And it was the most beautiful experience. And I thought that was going to be it. I thought that was it. We're going to be together from here on. But then it was a whole nother year. She withdrew, and I still kept trying to contact her. And eventually she got the courage to break free. And, you know, she actually had to tell her father that she was living with a friend, but she was actually living with me. Yeah,
So then she came. So in other words, there's a happy ending, but it was a true battle and a agonizing experience that you went through.
Yeah, absolutely. For all of us, you know, I could see my son was grieving as well because my daughter was not with us. You could see the pain that I was having. So there was just so much, you know, so much grief all the time. You know, we'd sit down and we'd watch a movie together, my son and I, and then all of a sudden we'd look over each other, we'd just be streaming with tears, and we knew what part it touched us, you know. Like The Lion Story was a movie that we watched, you know, and it was just, it was heartbreaking, you know, but it did, you know, in the end, you know, we've been able to rekindle our relationship, and our relationship's stronger than it's ever been. And but it's just sad that they missed out on like half of their childhood, you know, without me.
Well,
Yeah.
thank God the relationship was saved. And you said that this caused you to look back in your childhood. Please share about that.
Yeah, well, as I was learning about, you know, parental alienation and alienating behaviours and some of the kind of tactics that they use, I was starting to flash back to my childhood. I would see like things like, you know, emotionally confiding in you about adult things. And I remember my dad would tell me really inappropriate things, or he'd tell me about financial stuff or things that my mum had done that was bad. And like part of my brain would say, I remember all these good memories, but I'd sort of like had pushed them away because it hurt too much to think about my mum. It's like repressed positive memories. So it was a big struggle. Like it was weird. It was constant flashbacks. I would hear my dad say a story about, this big party that we had. And I knew which one it was he was referring to. And he said, oh, your mum was so drunk, you know, and then she fell in the pool. But then he would say, but then what I remember was that my dad was the one that was drunk. My mum was one that was sober, but my dad was flirting with other women, being inappropriate. He had his hand around another woman. I remember mum coming inside and me being with her, and she was trying to be like, everything's okay. But you could see that she was struggling with what was going on. So he'd repainted history as it always being all bad, and my mum being the one that was the bad person when he was the one that was, he was a bit of a rogue, you know, and he was a player. Australia, you know, I love my dad and I was protective of my dad, but it was really confronting, like reading all this list of behaviours and, you know, all these falsehoods and stuff that was being told, and then kind of going, well, hang on a minute. And then I started delving more into it. And I was a child of an international abduction. I was taken away from my mum in Australia and taken to the US. And I was taken there for 6 years. And in that time, I was pretty much abandoned over there. Like my dad and his new wife would go away all the time and I'd be left alone with $50 on the counter on a Friday, no parent supervision or anything like that. And
How old were you?
I was 11 years old when I was taken.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was similar age to my
When
kids.
you were left alone, though? 11 when you were left alone?
Absolutely. Yeah,
God.
Yeah, we'd pretty much roam. It sounds strange, but we kind of roamed the streets pretty much and going to parties. And, you know, I remember being taken in by the police a few times because you got like a curfew over there.
At 11? At
yeah,
11?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually more so 12 by that stage, 12, 13, where I would be, you know, walking down the Strand in Manhattan Beach and, you know, the police would pull up and say, what are you doing out these kind of hours at night time? And, you know, my dad was busy with my stepmom she was only 23, 24 years old. So she wasn't a lot older than us kids. You know, it was like having a bigger sister kind of thing. But, yeah, we were neglected and that sort of became normal. You know, we wouldn't be called in to have dinner and things like that. I'd eat at my friend's house or I'd go to 7-Eleven and get my things from there, you know. So it was strange because had such a loving, caring mom, but then all of a sudden I'm taken away from her and then I'm just left we lived in a really big house and it was a beautiful, you know, house on the waterfront, but there was no love inside that house. It was really empty. So it was a big change, and going through and learning about my kids, what they'd experienced, and reading these lists and then realizing that I was starting to grow this, not a hate, but a dislike towards things about my mother, because I was having all this pain, but not knowing like where that pain's coming from, but learning to blame my mother for all this stuff that had gone on. And this is the reason why you feel this way and things have happened like that. And
did you have the chance to reach out to your mom and reconcile?
When I was 18, we were all moving back to Australia. I decided not to go live with my dad and my stepmom and brother. I ended up moving back to Perth, where I was from, to try and find my mum. And I didn't know that my mum had still been going through court during that whole time. She'd been going through things to do with the financial side of stuff. She'd been given very poor advice from her lawyer, and it was a constant battle. And she was still trying to connect with me as well. Like she'd hired investigators and all sorts of stuff. So she'd been going through a lot. So when I eventually was able to find her. She was actually in Perth at that time. And I arranged a meeting with her. And when I saw her, I was now taller than her. And the last time I had seen her, I was below her chest height. Like when I'd hugged her, I was like below her chest height. And then now I was, you know, she was up to here on me. And I remember looking at her and just seeing this frail, broken person. But I had so much love inside, but I couldn't express it because my emotions were suppressed. And so we sat down and we spoke, and it's like her emotions were spilling on me, and like I wanted to talk about what I experienced, but in a way I wanted just to hold space together, just to feel. You know, I didn't want to hear talking. I didn't want to sort of talk about all the stuff that Dad had been telling me. But she said, "You're so much like your dad." And that just broke me. I get teary about it. It just totally broke me.
She didn't mean it insulting. She didn't mean it insulting, did she?
I think because she was hurting. There was things that were coming out of my mouth that were parroting my dad. And it was like two people trying to tell their sides of the story. You know, and this is something that I've really learned a lot, is that, you know, you have to put that behind you and get therapy for that, you know, get support with that kind of those, you know, thoughts and feelings and the trauma of being separated from your child or separated from a parent, you know, not understanding what each other have gone through. And then all of a sudden it's like this, like with the backwash of the wave. I always think, when you get these big waves that come in, and sometimes you get the backwash of the wave and you get stuck in that middle of the colliding. It was like that. We were just colliding and it didn't go well. And
I'm sorry.
We said our goodbyes and she gave me this rose and I got into the taxi, and I remember getting into the taxi, I was like screaming inside. Like I used to do this thing when I used to swim when I was in America. I used to swim, I used to scream under the water. And it was just a release thing. And I was like almost doing that in a taxi. I was like feeling like I was screaming inside myself, but not verbally letting it out. And I just wanted to tell her that I loved her. I couldn't tell her because of what I'd experienced. It was really sad because, sorry, I get upset about this one. It was quite difficult for me because I received a phone call months later, and it was someone saying, "I'm sorry to hear about your mum," and I was like, "What do you mean?" And they said, have you read the paper? And I said, "No, I haven't." I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "You better go and get the paper." So I ran down the street, picked up the paper, and it said how the red tape destroyed Nola. And my mum had gassed herself in the car. And
I'm sorry.
Threw my world upside down. It's a big thing for me, and it was really hard. And so, going back to what I've experienced with my mum and knowing how important it was for me to hold on, and do what I can, like self-care, stay connected, focus on all those foundations that you had together and never give up. It's so crucial that you don't give up and understand you've got your own pain and your own experiences, but your child has also got all that too, and they may not be able to communicate their authentic feelings and thoughts, but inside you've got a child there that actually does love you, and so this is why I became so passionate about the Eeny Meeny Miney Moe Foundation. I thought there was no resources out there. There was no one sort of campaigning here in Australia about it, and I thought I've got to do this, and I
Before we get into that, your pain and what you learned from what you with what you I went through this too a little bit. But what you went through with your mother, that pain gave you the strength to persevere with your own children, didn't it?
Absolutely it did. It made me understand the child's perspective and the parent's perspective, because you kind of, when you've been put under the magnifying glass and you've been portrayed as a bad parent, it's like you want to share you want to prove yourself, you want to prove your innocence all the time, and you feel like you have to explain everything to your child. But the child just wants the pain to go away and pick up from where they left off from when things were okay, and even though they might blame you for all these things, it's it's just critical to understand that, all this anger comes from pain.
So you never even heard the word parental alienation until you went through this and you realized that there's no information, there's no resources. So now tell us about the Eenie Meenie Miney Moe Foundation. What did you do?
Okay, so what we do, we're an advancing education and health services charity. We provide information on our website and which is eMM.org.au. And we have our Facebook pages and a LinkedIn page. We share all the latest evidence-based research on those platforms, and also like books and things like that practitioners can use, and books that are helpful for parents as well. We do like little infograms to help parents to understand some of the dynamics, to help to identify, what's happening to them in their own situation. And we are doing a we've been conducting research with the University of Tasmania, which has been really significant. Back in, I think it was 2015, I reached out to a psychologist and leading researcher at the University of Tasmania. Her name's Dr. Mandy Mathewson. And when I called her, I was sort of explaining these dynamics and things like that. And I was talking for a few minutes and she goes, "Oh, you mean parental alienation?" And I was like, "Oh my God, like somebody knows what parental alienation is." She says, "Oh boy, do I understand it." And she started talking to me and it was like this validation, like, you know, that I'm not crazy. I haven't made up this term and things like that, because there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation out there about it. And to actually find somebody who got it and who understood the pain that you experience, you know, as a child and as a parent. And yeah, so we started chatting and started communicating, and I supported one of her studies, and then we did another, she was doing another study. And then we decided that we were going to do an official agreement between our organisation and the University of Tasmania. And it's been wonderful, the support that we're getting from the University of Tasmania and the dedication that, you know, and understanding that Mandy has brought to the party, and inspiring other students at University of Tasmania to take an interest in this this phenomenon.
And besides you curating all those great resources and putting them online, do you also have day-to-day duties? What do you do? What do you do to try? How do you try to help children, parents, and families yourself? Do you counsel?
Yeah, I do consultations, but I don't heavily sort of promote that because I'm doing my degree at the moment in psychology. But the other work that I do is obviously managing the pages, managing our website, getting information out there as quick as I can, you know, the latest studies, circulating them, and also sending them through to local lawyers and things like that. You know, there's, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of disinformation out there, and there's a lot of people who think that they know what parental alienation is, and it's really important to know the difference between a true claim and a false claim, because there's sometimes there is an abusive parent that may claim parental alienation, and the child could end up being with the abuser, just like with parental alienation. You know, you could end up leaving a child with an abusive parent. So it's important to understand the differences of that. We're getting more and more people coming out talking about false claims and true claims. And the sad part is that there's many people just don't get it and don't know how to identify it or know what to do about it. You know, they think it's harmful to take the child away from the abusive parent, you know, but the long-term harm it causes, you're better off taking the child away and have that temporary distress, you know. But some occasions it's like popping that little bubble. You know, the child actually gets to see the parent and see that they're not an ogre, and they've had somebody take the pressure off them. They haven't had them sitting in this decision-making seat. And that's what I think practitioners really need to understand, is that the children just want that pain to go away, and they just want to love both parents, you know.
And you do more as an advocate than just with the Eenie Meenie Miney Moe Foundation. You also volunteer for the Parental Alienation Study Group. What do you do for them?
Yeah, I manage their the PAS interactive group, as well as the Parental Alienation Study Group page. I do all the postings of the latest research on there. And we have in the PASG group, I think there's over 600 practitioners that are members of that group. There's researchers, lawyers, psychologists, counsellors that are all have an interest in parental alienation. So when a study comes out, I send a message to all those members. And I also assist with the PASG newsletter that goes out to those members as well. You know, getting that circulated out through the website. Yeah.
Does PASG have one or two Facebook groups? Is there an interactive group and just a regular group?
Yeah, there's a PASG interactive group, and then there's a Parental Alienation Study Group page. So one's a Facebook page and one's a group. Yeah.
Gotcha. I got you. Very good. So whatever you send me, Amanda, I will also put in the description portion of this video, but just people who might be listening in their car, can you tell me how people can get in touch with you? And the other question, is it just Australians, or would you take emails or inquiries from anywhere across the world?
Well, pretty much from anywhere around the world. I do get a lot of contact from overseas saying, "Oh, we wish we had you in the UK or the US," and it's like, well, we can still circulate our information, around the world. But yes, I do consult. I actually have psychologists and psychologists, psychiatrists, and lawyers that do come to me that want some of the latest information. So I have people who might be doing a report in court, or they may be wanting to present a case and want to know, what's the latest research and things like that. So I do consult with the latest information to be able to support their cases. And also with parents who are self-representing, I can point them to the, helpful resources that have been published by a number of different experts from around the world, and also help them cope and how to communicate with their kids, like how I did, like how I was able to reunify with my children, sort of create that pathway home and keep that porch light on and let them know that you're always there, that you're always there loving them no matter what. I think that's the most important thing, is that parents need to understand that, is that you do keep that lifeline open to your kids and let them know that, that everything will be okay. And, because some parents get really angry and they respond to their children out of complete despair, and not realizing that this is exactly what the alienating parent wants. They want to create conflict between you and the child, but you have to do the complete opposite. You've got to understand that these are tactics. This is mind control. They want your time to be spent thinking about what they're doing, what's going to happen, and all that kind of stuff. And that's why self-care, I always promote self-care on my page and within our groups and things. I sort of went off a little bit of a tangent, but it's always something that I always throw in there. And
No, it's good. It's valuable.
Critical. Yeah.
Amanda, before I let you go, to my viewers, I want to acknowledge you and share that when you post something of mine, the views on the counter for each video, they skyrocket. So just to let everyone know that Amanda has a very large audience. She is very helpful for parents who are dealing with these types of issues. So I encourage anyone to support the Eenie Meenie Moe Foundation, and to go to the site, to use the resources. And Amanda, I want to thank you for two reasons. Number one, for helping me and the Law Center, but also we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. So I also want to thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And I just want to also thank you for the amazing videos that you produce. There's so much valuable information from, professionals from all around the world. And that's why I share them, because they are educational and they're most helpful for people to actually understand the dynamics and outcomes of parental alienation. So I thank you for that.
You're welcome, and I look forward to having a long professional partnership in any way I can help with the Eenie Meenie Miney Moe Foundation and whatever you're involved with.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been here with Amanda Sillars, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell to be alerted of new videos. Tune in every Tuesday night at 7, where you can watch together with us and other viewers. Check the description portion of this video where you can learn more about Amanda Sillars and the Eenie Meenie Miney Moe Foundation and the Law Center. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.